Alright, welcome back to another video from Lizard Landscapes. We've got a diorama of Bryce Canyon. So this I would consider to be like a beginner, maybe intermediate. There's no water, you're not having to deal with resin, so probably more of an intermediate project. Time consuming because of all of those little formations that are at Bryce Canyon. So creating those was quite time consuming. But let's go ahead and get started in creating this Bryce Canyon diorama. Alright, so you want to definitely have some sort of professional dust mask, gas mask on your face. So we're going to be using some hot wires from the hot wire foam factory. So using XPS foam, as I usually do. And at first I'm just going to use some razor blades and cutting out like a basic, pretty small square. Once I've got that cut out, I'm going to use a magic marker and trace around that, creating 3 of those same sized cubes. Going to use a hot wire from the hot wire foam factory. And I've got this stuck together with some small pins, so I haven't glued it, but I've got this little section mapped out in order to carve that out, because I want kind of like a sloping, the actual site of this park is called the Amphitheater of Bryce Canyon. So I want it to slope in that way. So in creating those little formations, I've got just little tiny rectangles of that same foam. So one way is just kind of spinning it in your fingers. You can kind of come up with some different looks. Or this, which is really what I did for most of the project, very thin piece of the XPS foam, taking a razor blade and just cutting out these little thin, tall triangles. So in looking at reference photos of this park, this seemed like just the fastest way of doing it. They look a little bit like tall rectangular formations. So I cut out way too many of these. I think it ended up being over 100. And you can always shape them a little bit more in cutting the top of it with a razor blade, but putting each one of them down and rolling it with your finger to try to get away from those sharp edges of it resembling a rectangle. And using various tools. One of these tools, or this one, is from like a sewing kit. But if you look at pictures of this site, these formations have quite a bit of texture. So they're not just these flat triangular shapes. So I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing these little pieces on here. First one of over 100 right there. So I would just say put on some good music, podcast, something, because it is kind of repetitive and time consuming. There's a little bit of decision making and like where these go according to what you're seeing with the reference photos. But also created a few different shaped formations. If you look at the reference photos, they're not all, these tall triangles, although this one kind of looks like a triangle, but creating some different formations so that it kind of breaks up that pattern. So I forgot to glue down the 3 main pieces, the 3 squares. So before I had already glued down some of those formations, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So what I've done is removed the small pins and put some glue in there, kind of sneak some glue in there for that top layer. And tedious, time-consuming process. So I've got some needle nose pliers there. Gonna put that in. So I would say this is loosely based on what I'm seeing, and there's no way to do exactly what you would be seeing with the Bryce Canyon reference photo, but creating some texture for the layers of soil, layers of earth underneath. So really just a whole bunch of horizontal lines with the occasional vertical line, and just creating that suggestion of layer upon layer being placed down. And with every project I do, I usually wind up with gaps. So sometimes those gaps look good. They suggest kind of a natural gap in the rock, but decided to fill these in. And go ahead and watch this intermission. All right, time for another intermission. This is where I go completely off topic and try to motivate those who haven't found God yet to start searching. There are several explanations I've heard of why the Bible exists or how it came to be. One is that it was written down as a lie, a hoax meant to deceive or lure people into many things, such as giving away their money. Another is that it's a myth, never meant to be taken seriously or literally. Another is obviously that it's the truth, which is what I believe. Among non-believers, I would say the most popular theory is that it was a lie, or is a lie. The issue I have with that is that you would have to believe that a liar sat down and came up with scriptures like 1 John 3:13, which says, "Marvel not, my brethren, if the world hate you," or Matthew 10:22, which says, "And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake," talking about Jesus, "but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." Or Matthew 5:11 through 12, "Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake," talking about Jesus there. "Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." Or John 15:18 through 19, "If the world hates you, know that it hated me first before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you." Or Matthew 24:9, "Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me." The me in that sentence is Jesus, talking about Christians. These are all things potentially going to happen to believers in Christ. Do any of those scriptures sound like someone trying to entice or tempt you, tempting someone into joining their organization? Why would a liar think that that was something that was going to motivate someone to join a group or a belief system? Particularly scriptures like Matthew 24:9, where it says you will be persecuted and put to death. To me, it doesn't line up with human nature, especially someone trying to purposefully deceive others. Sound like ideas from a liar, or does it sound more like God inspiring men to write down ideas they never would have come up with on their own? The point of these videos is really to motivate you to do your own research and to ultimately realize that this topic is worthy of your time. Check out all of the amazing testimonies online of people who have been to heaven and hell and whose lives have been transformed from following Jesus Christ. Thanks for listening. All right, so got cup here. I'm going to apply a whole bunch of white glue and spray some water in there, just watering down glue. Because I noticed that all of these little formations wound up being super fragile. So before starting the painting process, I'm going to try to strengthen all of these little formations by adding a watered down glue. And I am watering down some paint. So this is quite watery for this initial coat. Got a burnt orange. And you don't want to be painting with like a straight paint out of the tube for this. Those formations are so small, so tightly together that the paint being thick, if it wasn't watered down, would tend to like coagulate and potentially ruin the look of each individual formation being separate from each other. So watered that down, covered it in like a really dark brown orange, and now starting the process of this kind of dry brushing. It's a fairly wet brush, but removed a little bit of that paint on a rag or paper towel, but starting with like a lighter burnt orange. So the idea is you're applying all of these different layers and you're not covering up all of the layer that was previously put down. So and because of that, you wind up with this more complex look of all of these different colors, which if you look in nature, that's really what you're seeing. You're not seeing a strong, I guess, solid color. It's more of a combination of different colors. So applying a sort of light sand base color and then dry brushing a very bright orange onto that. So trying to get some of that texture underneath to show through. And dry brushing on more of like a prominent orange. So in looking at pictures of this site, there's quite a bit of color, quite a bit of orange, variations of orange, lighter orange. Finally painting directly onto those little formations. So you can really see with the texture, if you look closely in those formations, there's a lot of dark that has survived this process of all these layers. And painting on some white. It's not pure white, but it's like a bleached orange or very light orange. In looking at pictures, there are quite a bit of bleached rock within the formations. And dry brushing on some color for the layers of rock underneath. So it was a process of just going back, covering up quite a bit of a layer, going back in, re-adding some highlights. So putting in some watered down glue, and I'm going to add some model railroad foliage, because there's quite a bit of green bushes if you look at pictures of this site. So another way of adding more color into this. It's already got quite a bit of color, but being able to add some green in this case really enhance the look. And painting on some, so I'm trying to mirror some of the color that is already in the top part, the main part of this diorama, trying to mirror some of those colors, in this case using that bleached sandstone look for one of the layers of this rock. Obviously you've got some burnt orange in there, and then as a last stage putting in a kind of a fade dark layer at the very bottom, and this really adds some depth to have this fade so it doesn't look flat. See how that looks flat, but now after applying this sort of darker color on the bottom, kind of gives it that depth. So there you have it, Bryce Canyon diorama. So be sure and check out the other videos on the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.